There is nothing better than analyzing coaching decisions. We've had a lot so far this season, from Sean McVay's fourth down attempt and successful conversion in Seattle, Doug Peterson going for 2 a couple weeks ago, and then Pat Shurmur on Monday Night Football going for 2 down 8. And there's no better place to do it than from the friendly confines of an office in Cincinnati or the media room in Atlanta, wherever you feel safe from the sideline. It's very important to analyze from that perspective, and that's what we're going to do here. I'm George Chahrouri. Eric Eager is alongside. We're brought to you, of course, by mybookie.ag. All right, let's just dive into it from a sort of mental standpoint. The 2-point conversion, going for 2 versus kicking the PAT.
Yeah, I think, football people always want more football, right? And so the idea that, if we get 2 touchdowns, we're going to extend it in overtime, and in that overtime period, we're going to show that we're better than the other team. And that's just simply not true in many cases. If you're an underdog, for example, you want to increase variance. You want the game to be shorter, and the best way to make a game shorter is not to have an extra 2/3 of a quarter that overtime affords you. And so that's why I think that the fundamental reason behind why going for 2 on the first touchdown is the better decision.
I want to play more football. More exercise, always good. We're going to dive into all of the numbers here in a second. Before we do, I want to tell you about the best place to make your Sundays more enjoyable. That's mybookie.ag. Watching football on Sunday is fun, but watching football on Sunday with a little bit riding on it is even better, and that's the best place to do it. Mybookie.ag offers all of the possible bet types you could want, all of the sports you could want, so even if you're not a Sunday person, I'd check it out as well. And if you use promo code PFF, you can get a $1-for-$1 match on your first deposit. We use it. We love it. In-game live betting, also a part of the site. So head to mybookie.ag, where you play, you win, you get paid. All right. There's a couple things that just mentally people have an issue with, right? And one of them is I'm sort of telling my defense that by going for 2, I don't believe in them. And I want to get that out of the way first, because that's just totally wrong. Right? Whether you kick the PAT or you go for 2 in this situation, in Shurmur's situation, you are relying on your defense to get a stop so that you can go score. So let's throw that out of the way. And then secondly, say that, look, if you haven't communicated this with the entirety of your team, you have issues far beyond your decision making from a cultural standpoint. So with those things shoved to the side, let's jump into this a little bit. So we're going to assume a couple of things in favor of the PAT truthers. One of them is that you're going to make 100% of your PATs. That's an overestimate.
Too soon for Baltimore fans. Right?
Certainly too soon for Baltimore fans. We're going to assume that. That's in your PAT truthers' favor. The second thing we'll assume that's in PAT truthers' favor and more football's favor is that when you go to overtime, you have a 50% chance of winning. If you're the underdog, that's not the case. So we're going to be generous in those situations. And then the last thing that we're going to assume is that your defense does the right thing. They get the job done. They get a stop. And that you're able to go back down and score a second touchdown. So everything goes in your favor, all things being equal. And then the question becomes, should I kick or should I go for 2?
Yeah, so if you go for 2 on that first touchdown, right, and you happen to make it, and then you get that second touchdown and you kick the PAT and the PAT is 100%, that's 45 out of every 100 instances you win the game with no questions asked. No uncertainty, no overtime, no coin flips, nothing, right? And then if you don't make the 2-point conversion, there's a collection of games that you still win. Right? The games where you go for 2 and you don't make it, you can still go for 2 and make it a subsequent time, and then you're back to the uncertainty that were all of your games before, but only a small subset of the games now.
Yeah, so we actually ran the chance of converting, and it's not 50%, right? It's actually, you're the Giants, you have Eli Manning, he hasn't been great. It's about 45%. We're rounding here to make it easier. So you have this, say, percentage, you have 100 games, percent means out of 100, that's how it works. You have 100 games, 45 of those you win by going for 2 that first time. Okay, so that's great. I have 145. Now, if you don't get the 2-point conversion the first time, that'll happen 55% of the time. That's a little hurtful to some people, but it happens. You then have to go for 2 on the second touchdown, and you might not get that either, right? So if you actually multiply that out, that'll happen 30% of the time. So 30 of those 100 games, you're just going to lose. I'm sorry. It's a hurtful but truthful reality. So you have 45 games you win by going for 2, 30 of the 100 that you lose. Now those other 25, what are happening to those games?
Yeah, those go into overtime, and being, again, conservative, helping the underdog here, you win half of those games. That equates out to 12.5% of the full 100 games. And so you're at, what, 57.5% versus the 50% that you had if you just assumed overtime a priori. So that's a substantial benefit just for making a coaching decision on the first touchdown.
You're telling me you'd rather win 58 than 50?
Yes, in any instance.
I don't know if I can buy that. I mean, here's the thing. It seems convoluted. It seems like there's a lot of different ways to weave through this argument and, how well is my team playing and all this other stuff. But look, let's assume that your team is your team, right? That has been the way it has been for the first 7 weeks of the season. That's a much bigger sample size than what has happened on the last possession or how you feel about your defense at this point. That is the right assumption to take mathematically. And then when you break it down and you just think about it in terms of how many games can I win with this strategy versus this strategy, it's really pretty simple. 58 versus 50. You want to give yourself that extra opportunity at every point that you can. And hopefully with teams starting to do this more, we'll actually see some of these underdogs make a little bit of headway in terms of, winning these games and making things more exciting.
Yeah, we almost saw it in London with the Tennessee Titans. If the Tennessee Titans make that 2-point conversion, they win the game without any thought of overtime. They go into overtime, they play the Chargers. They're not going to be favored in that, right? So I would rather give myself a play or two to determine everything than to give myself a 10-minute overtime where as the amount of snaps happens, the fact that you're an underdog starts to reveal itself more and more. You're an underdog, you want more variance, you want fewer plays.
It's simple. Basketball's been doing this forever, so it's about time that we get on board with it. Until the next coaching controversy, go to ProFootballFocus.com where you can read all of our stuff and hit up the PFF forecast where you can listen to our dulcet tones twice a week.